A pregnant single mother hid in an abandoned cabin until the owner appeared, and a forbidden love was born between them, with secrets changing their lives forever. A story that will touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment where you are watching from. The March rain pounded against the foggy windows of the old wooden house, creating a rhythmic sound that echoed through the empty rooms. Sarah adjusted the worn fabric bag on her shoulder and peered into the property through the ajar door. The smell of mildew mixed with the sweet aroma of eucalyptus invaded her nostrils, bringing a strange sense of comfort amidst the apparent abandonment. "At least it's dry," she murmured to herself, running her free hand over her 6-month pregnant belly that protruded beneath her faded cotton shirt. Her slender fingers trembled slightly, not sure if it was from the chill of the New York afternoon or the nervousness that had accompanied her since she left New York 3 days earlier. The 26-year-old possessed that delicate beauty of women from the countryside, with brown hair always tied back in a simple ponytail and honey-colored eyes that seemed to carry a weight greater than her age. Her hands, calloused from her work at the public hospital where she had served as a nurse for 4 years, contrasted with the gentleness of her cautious movements. Sarah carefully pushed the door open, as if asking permission from the silence. The hardwood floor creaked under her bare feet. She had taken off her shoes on the porch to avoid making noise. The main room was spacious, dominated by a stone fireplace that hadn't seen fire in a long time. Furniture covered with white sheets created ghostly shapes in the dim light of the rainy afternoon. "Sorry for the disturbance," she whispered into the void, addressing invisible owners who might never know of her presence there. She had stumbled upon the cabin by chance, 3 kilometers after getting off the bus in the small town of Clear Waters. The driver, an elderly man with a graying mustache, had casually mentioned that the Miller property had been abandoned for months since the old patriarch died and the grandson returned to New York. "Beautiful place, but too lonely for today's youth," he had commented, shaking his head disapprovingly. The information sounded like a blessing to Sarah, who was seeking exactly that: enough solitude so that no one would ask questions about a pregnant nurse without a ring on her finger or a husband in sight. Her savings would allow for a few weeks of subsistence, enough time to decide what to do when the baby was born. Exploring the rooms of the house, she discovered a simple but functional kitchen with a wood stove still holding warm ashes in the firebox. Someone had been there recently. Sarah felt a tightness in her chest. What if the owner returned? What if she was invading someone's privacy? But physical and emotional exhaustion spoke louder. In the last 3 months, since discovering her pregnancy and facing the cruel rejection from the baby's father, she hadn't known a peaceful night's sleep. Dr. Richard Miller, a successful lawyer 15 years her senior, had been clear when she told him about the baby. "This doesn't fit into my plans, Sarah. You're a smart girl. Find a solution." His solution included an envelope with money and a card for a private clinic. Her solution included returning the money and disappearing before he tried to force her into a decision she could never forgive herself for. Sarah chose the smallest room at the back of the house, where a twin bed covered with a yellowed crocheted blanket offered the first comfort in days. From the window, she could see an abandoned orchard where apple and peach trees struggled against the tall weeds. It was as if nature was trying to reclaim territory that humans had temporarily abandoned. She was almost falling asleep when she heard the sound. Heavy boots on the porch floor, determined footsteps of someone who knew every loose board of the wood. Sarah felt her blood run cold. She remained motionless, breathing as quietly as possible, while listening to the front door open with a familiar creak. "What the hell?" a deep male voice murmured in the main room. The footsteps moved through the house with the confidence of someone in their own territory. Sarah could hear drawers being opened, objects being moved. Her fingers gripped the blanket tightly, as if it could make her invisible. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee began to waft through the house 15 minutes later. Whoever it was preparing a meal, softly whistling a country tune that she couldn't identify. It was a melancholic melody, the kind that men from the countryside often hummed when they thought they were alone. Sarah slid out of bed with extreme caution, heading to the bedroom window. Maybe she could escape through the back without being seen. But the rain had intensified, and in the growing darkness of the night, it would be impossible to find her way back to the road without getting lost or tripping. Moreover, a small but persistent part of her mind whispered that she didn't want to leave. For the first time in months, she felt at home, even sharing the space with an invisible stranger. The sound of boots, the aroma of coffee, even the melancholic whistling created an atmosphere of domestic life that she hadn't experienced since childhood at her grandparents' house. She remembered the words of her grandmother Grace, who had passed away 2 years earlier. Sometimes God places people in the right place at the right time, even when we think we are lost. Perhaps it was the superstition of a simple woman from the countryside. But Sarah was beginning to believe that she hadn't arrived at that cabin by chance. The baby moved inside her belly, a gentle motion that always calmed her. She placed her hand on her belly and whispered, "We're safe here, little one, at least for today." She decided to remain hidden until she understood the situation better. If the man was the owner might negotiate a few days of stay in exchange for domestic work or property care. If he were just another intruder like her, they could find a way to coexist. During the night, Sarah remained vigilant, listening to the creaks of the house settling under the weight of 2 inhabitants, pretending not to know of each other's existence. It was the beginning of a dance where every movement would be calculated and every silence would carry meanings neither dared to decipher. The rain finally eased in the early hours of the morning, leaving only the soft sound of droplets trickling from the roof. Sarah fell asleep, cradled by this natural rhythm, dreaming of a future where she and her baby could belong somewhere, even if it was just a room in the back of a stranger's house in the countryside of New York. The aroma of homemade bread and strong coffee woke Sarah before the sun fully rose. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the golden light filtering through the raw cotton curtains. For a moment, she forgot where she was, until reality returned like a bucket of cold water. There was someone else in the house, someone who clearly knew how to cook better than she did. She lay there for nearly an hour, listening to the morning sounds from the kitchen. The creaking floorboards indicated that the man was tall and heavy, his decisive footsteps echoing through the house with the familiarity of someone who had known each room since childhood. Occasionally, he murmured something inaudible, as if talking to himself or to a pet. When silence finally returned to the house, Sarah risked a cautious exit from the room. The kitchen still held the warmth of the wood stove, and on the rustic wooden table she found a surprise that made her heart race. A clean mug, a small plate, and a slice of still warm homemade bread covered by a white napkin. There was no note, no explanation, just the silent offer of a meal. Sarah held the mug with both trembling hands. Could it be a trap, a way to lure her out of hiding, or was it simply the instinctive kindness of someone who sensed signs of hunger and need? She devoured the bread in silence, each crumb tasting like heaven. It had been 2 days since she had eaten a decent meal, sustaining herself only on cheap cookies and water. The baby responded to the nourishment with gentle movements, as if also thanking her for the unexpected kindness. Thus began the strange routine of the following days. Sarah remained hidden in the back room during the mornings, listening to his footsteps around the house. Around 8 o'clock, the sound of a diesel truck would drive away down the dirt road, leaving the cabin in absolute silence. It was then that she ventured out onto the property. In the first few days, she limited herself to the house, exploring the rooms with the reverence of someone visiting a museum. The main room held black and white photographs of several generations of the same family. Men in hats and mustaches posing alongside women in dark dresses. Serious children looking directly at the camera with that solemnity typical of old photos. One photograph in particular caught her attention, a boy of about 8 years old, smiling while holding a calf in his arms. His bright blue eyes sparkled with pure joy, contrasting with the formal atmosphere of the other images. On the back of the frame, someone had written in cursive, "Ryan, summer of 1995. Ryan. Now she had a name to associate with the nighttime footsteps and morning coffees. As the days passed, Sarah ventured around the land surrounding the house. The cabin was larger than she had initially imagined. Over 20 acres of pastures, abandoned orchards, and a small pond that reflected the sky like a natural mirror. There was also an empty corral, stables that hadn't housed animals in a long time, and a wild garden where tomatoes and peppers grew without human care. It was in the garden that Sarah found her first real occupation. Her nurse's hands, accustomed to caring for injured people, seemed to have a natural talent for tending to sick plants. She began by clearing the land, pulling weeds, and reorganizing the beds with the patience of someone who had all the time in the world. Working the soil brought a peace she hadn't experienced in months. Under the warm autumn sun of New York, with her hands dirty from black earth and the scent of wild rosemary in her hair, Sarah began to feel that perhaps she could build a simple life there, even if just temporarily. It was during these moments in the garden that she sometimes sensed she was being watched. She never managed to catch him directly, but she developed a sixth sense for his presence, a shadow moving among the trees of the orchard, a reflection in the barn window, a feeling of eyes on her that made her pause her work and look around, finding nothing but the wind in the leaves. Ryan, now she thought of him by name, clearly knew of her presence, but chose to keep his distance. It was like a silent dance where both respected each other's personal space while sharing the same territory. The silent offers of food continued. Sometimes it was fresh bread, other times seasonal fruits, or a thermos with still warm soup. Sarah began to reciprocate in the only way she could, by leaving the dishes clean, sweeping the porch, organizing items he had left scattered. It was a mute conversation through small domestic gestures. One morning, while watering the tomatoes she had transplanted, Sarah heard the sound of the truck returning earlier than usual. Her first instinct was to run to her room and hide, but something made her hesitate. Perhaps it was the exhaustion of living as a fugitive in her own life, or perhaps it was the growing curiosity about the man who cared for her without asking for anything in return. She remained in the garden, pretending not to have heard the vehicle approaching. Ryan. He parked the navy blue pickup truck near the barn and got out slowly, as if he were also deciding what his next move would be. Sarah discreetly observed him through the leaves of the papaya tree. He was even more imposing than she had imagined from the sounds of his footsteps. He must have been over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders that filled his blue and white plaid shirt completely. His dark hair was tousled by the wind, and even from a distance she could tell that his hands were large and calloused from farm work. He stood next to the pickup truck for almost 5 minutes, clearly aware of her presence in the garden. Sarah continued watering the plants with deliberately calm movements, as if his presence were the most natural thing in the world. Finally, Ryan began walking in her direction. Sarah felt her heart race, but she forced herself to continue working. Each of his steps seemed to echo like thunder in her ears. When he stopped about 10 feet away, she finally looked up. The face she found surprised her. She expected to see anger or suspicion, but the light brown eyes watching her carried only deep sadness and cautious curiosity. Ryan must have been around 35, with premature wrinkles around his eyes that suggested someone who had faced more responsibilities than he should have for his age. "The plants look better," he finally said, his deep voice carrying a soft accent from rural New York. "My grandmother would be happy to see someone taking care of her garden again." Sarah lowered her eyes, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment and nervousness. "I'm sorry for being here without permission. I didn't have anywhere else to—" "You don't need to explain," Ryan gently interrupted her. "Everyone deserves a roof over their heads, especially in your condition." He had obviously noticed her pregnancy. Sarah instinctively placed her hand on her belly, a protective gesture that didn't go unnoticed. "Are you okay? Do you need anything?" he asked, taking a step back as if to show he posed no threat. The kindness in his voice almost made Sarah cry. It had been so long since anyone had asked how she was, since anyone had shown genuine concern for her well-being. "I'm fine," she managed to respond, although her voice trembled slightly. "Thank you for the morning coffees. You didn't have to—" "My grandmother always said that a home without shared food isn't a true home," Ryan replied, a half-smile touching the corners of his mouth. "You can stay as long as you need. The house is too big for just one person anyway." They remained silent for a few more minutes, each processing the new dynamic of their unofficial arrangement. Sarah felt she should say something more, explain her situation, but the words seemed stuck in her throat. Ryan finally broke the silence. "I'll leave some things in the pantry. Fruits, vegetables, maybe some meat. For you and—" He hesitated, glancing quickly at her belly. "For both of you." He turned to leave, but stopped after a few steps. "Sarah," he said without turning around. "That's your name, right? I saw it on the envelope you left in the kitchen." She confirmed with a nod that he couldn't see, but somehow he sensed it. "Welcome to the family ranch of the Johnsons, Sarah. I hope you find the peace you're looking for here." With those words, Ryan walked back to the house, leaving Sarah alone in the garden, with tears silently streaming down her cheeks. For the first time in months, they were tears of relief. The following days brought a strange but comforting routine. Ryan left every morning before sunrise, the roar of the diesel pickup fading down, the dusty road that led to town. Sarah took advantage of those hours of solitude to explore the property more deeply, discovering forgotten corners that seemed to hold stories of past generations. On the third morning after their first meeting in the garden, she discovered the main barn. The faded red wooden structure housed old farming equipment covered by tarps, but it was in the loft that Sarah found something that changed her perspective on Ryan and his family. Dozens of photo albums were organized on wooden shelves, each marked with years dating back to the 1940s. With the care of someone handling treasures, Sarah flipped through the yellowed pages, watching the story of the Johnson family unfold in black and white, then sepia, finally in faded colors. Ryan appeared in many of the more recent photos, always smiling, always surrounded by people who clearly loved him. There were graduation pictures, him in a dark suit holding a diploma in rural administration from the University of New York. Others showed summer festivals at the ranch, with dozens of people dancing in the front yard of the house. But it was one specific photo that made Sarah catch her breath. Ryan, a few years younger, was embracing an elegant blonde woman dressed in a simple white dress. Behind them, the main house of the ranch was decorated with flowers and colorful ribbons. On the back, someone had written, "Ryan and Emily, engagement, December 2019. Sarah felt a strange pang in her chest, jealousy, curiosity. It was hard to define, but the image of happiness etched on his face contrasted dramatically with the sadness she had perceived in his eyes during their meeting in the garden. Where was Emily now? Why was Ryan alone at the ranch? These questions accompanied her throughout the rest of the day as she tended to the garden and organized the small pantry he had left stocked with supplies. There was fresh baguette, artisanal cheeses from the region, seasonal fruits, and even prenatal vitamins that brought tears to her eyes from the thoughtfulness. That night, Sarah established a new routine. Instead of locking herself in the back room as soon as she heard the pickup return, she stayed in the kitchen, preparing dinner for both of them. They never ate together. She would leave the meal ready and retreat when she heard his footsteps in the house, on the porch, but he knew he appreciated the gesture when he found the empty and clean plates the next morning. It was during one of those nighttime preparations that the first accident happened. Sarah was chopping onions for a stir-fry when she felt a sudden dizziness. The knife slipped from her fingers, cutting the palm of her left hand. Blood began to flow immediately, staining the cutting board and dripping onto the kitchen floor. "Damn," she murmured, pressing a dish towel against the cut. Pregnancy had made her blood pressure unstable and small. Episodes of dizziness were common, but she had always managed to control them. This time was different. The edges of her vision began to darken, and Sarah felt her legs go weak. She tried to lean against the sink, but the world spun violently, and she collapsed onto the kitchen floor, losing consciousness. That's how Ryan found her 20 minutes later. Sarah woke up on the sofa in the living room, a cold compress on her forehead, and the cut on her hand carefully cleaned and bandaged. Ryan was sitting in a nearby chair, his large hands gently holding a glass of water with sugar. "Take it slow," he said when she tried to sit up too quickly. "You lost some blood and had a drop in blood pressure. It's normal during pregnancy, but it scared a few years off my life." His voice carried a genuine concern that made Sarah's heart race for reasons unrelated to the dizziness. His light brown eyes studied her face as if searching for signs that she was really okay. "I'm sorry," she murmured, trying to get up. "I didn't mean to bother you. I was just trying to make dinner and... Sarah." The way he said her name made her stop talking immediately. "You're not bothering anyone. But you need to be more careful. When was the last time you saw a doctor?" The question made her blush with embarrassment. The truth was that she hadn't had a prenatal checkup in over a month, since before fleeing New York. She had no money for private consultations and was terrified of appearing in the public system where Dr. Richard or his family might find her. "It's been a while," she admitted quietly. Ryan sighed deeply, running his hand through his dark hair in a frustrated expression that was clearly not directed at her. "There's a doctor in town, Dr. Henry. He has been taking care of my family since I was a kid. He's discreet, reliable. I'll take you there tomorrow." "I can't afford it," Sarah started, but he raised his hand to interrupt her. "It's not about money, it's about you and your baby being okay." He paused, as if carefully choosing his next words. "Besides, you've been working on the property, taking care of the garden, organizing the home. Consider the medical care as part of the arrangement." Arrangement. It was the first time either of them had directly mentioned the strange setup they had developed. Sarah felt she should protest, maintain her independence, but the truth was she desperately needed medical care and had no alternatives. "Thank you," she whispered, and for the first time since arriving at the cabin, she looked directly into his eyes for more than a few seconds. What she saw there surprised her. Beyond the kindness and concern, there was a deep loneliness that mirrored her own. Ryan seemed to be someone who was also running away from something, hiding in the family cabin just as she was. "Ryan," she said impulsively, "can I ask, why are you here? I mean, alone? The photos in the barn show that you had a life in New York, that you had..." She hesitated. "That you had a fiancé." His face immediately closed off, the emotional openness of the last few minutes turning into a carefully neutral mask. Sarah instantly regretted the question. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "It's none of my business. I shouldn't have..." Emily decided that life in the countryside wasn't for her. Ryan replied after a long silence, his voice carefully controlled. She wanted me to sell the cabin for us to stay in New York permanently. When I refused, well, we found out we wanted different futures. There was more to that story. Sarah could see it in the tension of his jaw, in the way his fingers involuntarily clenched. But she knew she had no right to press for more details. "I'm sorry," she said sincerely. Ryan shrugged, as if the pain was something he had learned to carry alone. "Sometimes things don't work out as we plan. The important thing is to move on." They sat in silence for a few minutes, each lost in their own painful memories. Sarah realized that they were both emotional refugees in that cabin, each fleeing a past that had hurt them deeply. "Well," Ryan finally said, getting up from the chair, "you should rest. Tomorrow we wake up early for the doctor's appointment." He headed for the door, but paused in the doorway. "Sarah, thank you for dinner and for taking care of my grandmother's garden. She would be happy to know that someone brought life back to those beds." After he retreated to his own room, Sarah finally confirmed that he was sleeping in the master bedroom of the home. She stayed on the sofa for another hour, processing the first real conversation they had had. For the first time since arriving at the cabin, Sarah allowed herself to imagine that she might have found more than a temporary shelter. Perhaps she had found someone who understood what it meant to carry wounds that no one else could see. Outside, the night song of the crickets blended with the distant sound of the wind in the eucalyptus trees, creating a rural symphony that lulled Sarah into her first truly peaceful sleep in months. For the first time, she didn't dream of chases or rejections. She dreamed of gentle hands tending to wounds and soft voices promising that, at least for a while, she was home. The trip to town the next morning was wrapped in a comfortable silence. Ryan drove the pickup truck carefully along the dirt roads, avoiding the deeper potholes to prevent jolts that might disturb Sarah. She gazed out the window at the rural landscape. Green pastures dotted with dairy cattle, small farms with simple brick houses, and in the distance, the Blue Ridge Mountains, creating a bluish horizon. "Does Dr. Henry know your family well?" Sarah asked, breaking the silence as they entered the urban area of Clear Waters. "Forever," Ryan replied, parking in front of a single-story house painted light blue that served as a medical office. "He delivered me, took care of my grandmother in her last years, treated my grandfather when he had a heart attack. He's more than a doctor to the family. He's almost like an uncle." Dr. Henry's office was exactly what Sarah expected from a small-town doctor. The waiting room had walls covered with photographs of newborn patients, antique but well-kept furniture, and yellowed copies of Time stacked on a dark wooden coffee table. "Ryan Johnson." The warm voice of the doctor echoed down the hallway as he appeared to greet them. Dr. Henry must have been around 60, with completely white hair and a paternal smile that immediately reassured Sarah. "What a joy to see you here, my boy, and this must be Sarah." Sarah was surprised that Ryan had already mentioned her, but the doctor greeted her so naturally that she immediately felt at ease. The consultation lasted nearly an hour. Dr. Henry examined Sarah with the patience of someone who had plenty of time and genuine concern for the well-being of his patients. He asked detailed questions about her health, medical history, and the symptoms she had experienced. "The baby is developing perfectly," he announced, after performing the ultrasound with equipment that, despite being old, worked flawlessly. 6.5 months by my calculations, a healthy and active girl." A girl. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. Throughout these months, she had referred to the baby only as little one or baby, avoiding forming very specific emotional connections, for fear of losing her in some way. Now, knowing she was carrying a daughter made everything more real, more precious. As for the episodes of dizziness, Dr. Henry continued. They're normal at this stage, but you need to eat better and rest more. I will prescribe specific vitamins and an iron supplement. Your blood pressure is a bit low, but nothing to worry about. When they left the office, Ryan was quieter than usual. He drove to the pharmacy to pick up the prescribed medications, then made a stop at the local grocery store to buy fruits and other items Dr. Henry had recommended for Sarah's diet. You didn't need to buy all this, Sarah said, as he loaded the bags into the pickup truck. I can contribute to the expenses. With what money? Ryan asked, but his voice carried no judgment, just a gentle acknowledgement of reality. Sarah blushed, realizing he was right. Her few savings were almost gone, and she had no prospects for income in the near future. I can work more on the property, she offered. Take care of the home, the garden, maybe help with paperwork if you have... Sarah. Ryan stopped loading the bags and turned to her. You're 6.5 months pregnant. You don't need to feel obligated to work for food and shelter, especially not after finding out it's a girl. The way he said, a girl, made something strange happen in Sarah's chest. There was a tenderness in his voice that she hadn't noticed before, as if the news of a baby girl had touched some sensitive part of her soul. During the drive back, the silence had a different quality. Sarah sensed that Ryan was processing something important, but she didn't know if she should ask or let him sort it out alone. It was only when they returned to the cabin and were unloading the groceries that he finally spoke. Emily lost a baby, he said abruptly, without looking at Sarah. 2 years ago. It was a girl, too. Sarah paused with a bag of vegetables in her hands, feeling the weight of the revelation. Suddenly, many things made sense. Ryan's loneliness, the end of the engagement, his constant presence at the cabin. Ryan, I'm so sorry. 5 months of pregnancy, he continued, as if he needed to finish telling the story he had kept for so long. Emily was driving home from work when a drunk driver hit her car. She was injured but survived. The baby didn't. Sarah felt tears burning in her eyes. Instinctively, she placed her hand on her belly, a protective gesture that did not go unnoticed by Ryan. Is that why you two ended? She asked gently. Not exactly. Ryan finally looked at her, and Sarah saw a deep pain in his brown eyes. We ended because I wanted to try again, to build a family here at the cabin, and she couldn't bear the thought of having children anymore. The loss broke something inside her that I didn't know how to fix. They remained silent for a few minutes, each respecting the weight of shared pain. Sarah finally understood why Ryan had been so kind to her from the first day, why he seemed to instinctively understand her needs as a pregnant and vulnerable woman. That's why you've been so careful with me, she said, not as a question, but as a realization. It's not just kindness, it's protection. Ryan nodded slowly. When I saw you in the garden that first day, pregnant and clearly running from something, all I could think about was how I would have taken care of Emily if she had needed it, how I would have wanted someone to care for her if I hadn't been around. The raw honesty of his confession made Sarah's heart race. She realized she was developing feelings for this man that went far beyond gratitude and that scared her deeply. Ryan, she said carefully, I can't, we can't. You understand my situation is complicated, right? I have problems that could affect you if you get too involved. What kind of problems? He asked, taking a step closer. Sarah hesitated. Part of her wanted to tell him everything about Dr. Richard, the cruel rejection, the fear that he might find her and try to force her into decisions she didn't want to make. But another part was afraid that the truth could destroy the safe refuge she had found in the cabin. The baby's father, she finally said, he's not a good person, and he has the resources to cause me problems if he wants. Ryan's jaw visibly tightened. "Did he hurt you?" "Not physically," Sarah quickly replied, "but emotionally, yes. And I'm afraid of what he might try to do when he finds out where I am." "Does he know you're pregnant?" "He does, and he made it very clear that he wants nothing to do with the baby." Sarah took a deep breath before continuing. "In fact, he wanted me to not have the baby." The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Sarah could see the anger forming in Ryan's eyes, but she also sensed that he was struggling to control it. "What kind of man?" he began, but stopped, clearly trying to maintain his composure. "I'm sorry, it's not my place to judge." "You have the right to know what you're getting into," Sarah said. "If he shows up here looking for me—" "If he shows up here," Ryan interrupted her, his voice carrying a determination she had never heard before, "he will have to go through me first." The fierce protection in his voice made something melt inside Sarah's chest. For the first time in months, she felt truly safe, truly protected. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. "Why are you taking care of me, of us?" Ryan was silent for a long moment, studying her face as if searching for the right words. "Because," he finally said, "since you arrived here, this house has started to feel like a home again, and because when I look at you and your daughter, I can imagine a future that I haven't been able to see in years." The confession hung in the air between them, laden with possibilities and fears. Sarah felt they were on the brink of something that would change their lives forever, but she also knew there were still secrets and pains that needed to be faced before they could take any steps forward. For now, it was enough to know she was no longer alone, that there was someone willing to stand by her side as she built a future for herself and her daughter. It was more than she had dared to hope for when she arrived at the cabin 3 weeks earlier, carrying only a suitcase and a broken heart. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reflected in the windows of the home. Sarah looked around, at the garden she had helped revive, at the house that was starting to feel like home, at the man who had chosen to protect her even without knowing her entire story, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. The following weeks brought a routine that Sarah had never imagined possible. The days at the cabin took on a rhythm of their own, dictated by the rising and setting of the sun, the needs of the land, and the growing intimacy between two people learning to trust each other. Sarah woke every morning to the aroma of coffee that Ryan brewed before heading out for his chores. He never left as early as he used to. Now he stayed long enough to have breakfast with her, discussing plans for the property or simply enjoying the comfortable silence they had developed. "The forecast calls for rain this weekend," Ryan commented one April morning, watching the clouds gather on the horizon. "It will be good for the garden, but maybe we should check the roof of the barn. There are some loose shingles." Sarah nodded, slicing fresh cheese they had bought in town the day before. "I can help. Before the pregnancy, I used to help my dad with small repairs around the house." "No way!" Ryan replied immediately, but his tone was gentle, protective. "You, at 7 months pregnant, are not climbing any roofs, but maybe you can pass me the tools from down there." His constant concern for her safety and well-being had become a comforting constant. Sarah had never felt so cared for, so protected. It was as if Ryan had taken on the responsibility of looking after her and the baby with a dedication that went far beyond simple kindness. That afternoon, while Ryan fixed the roof, Sarah organized the paperwork he kept scattered around the makeshift office in the living room. She discovered that the cabin was more prosperous than she had imagined. Ryan leased most of the land to local producers and had stable contracts that ensured a comfortable income. "You have a good business here," she commented when he came down from the roof, sweaty and with greasy hands. "But some of these contracts could be renegotiated. You're charging below market value." Ryan stopped wiping his hands on his shirt and looked at her with interest. "You understand rural management?" "I understand numbers," Sarah replied, feeling her cheeks flush. "I worked in hospital administration for 2 years before returning to nursing, and my dad had a small farm in Missouri. I learned a few things by observing." "Show me," Ryan said, sitting next to her at the makeshift table. For the next 2 hours, Sarah explained her observations about the contracts, suggesting adjustments that could significantly increase the property's income without overburdening the tenants. Ryan listened attentively, occasionally asking questions that showed he was genuinely interested in her opinions. "You're amazing," he finally said, when she finished explaining a plan to reorganize the contracts. "How did you do you know all of this?" Sarah shrugged, trying to hide the pleasure she felt from the compliment. "I've always been good with numbers, and observing people has taught me a lot about business. At the hospital, I saw how small administrative improvements could make a huge difference in the quality of care. Would it be interesting for you to help with the management of the cabin?" Ryan asked hesitantly. "I mean, like a real job, with a salary and everything?" The proposal made Sarah's heart race. It was more than a job offer. It was a way to become truly independent, to contribute meaningfully to the property she had started to love, as if it were her own. "Are you sure?" she asked carefully. "I don't want you to feel obligated just because I'm living here." "Sarah," Ryan turned to look at her directly, "you practically doubled the productivity of the garden in a month, organized the home better than it has been in years, and now you're showing me ways to improve the property's income. If anyone is doing a favor here, it's you to me." The warmth in his voice made something stir in Sarah's chest. It was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore the feelings growing between them, the way her heart raced when he smiled, how she felt safe and loved in his presence. That night, as they prepared dinner together, a new routine they had developed, Sarah felt the baby move vigorously inside her belly. It was such a strong movement that she couldn't help but let out a small gasp of surprise. "Is everything okay?" Ryan asked immediately, stepping closer with concern. "It's fine," Sarah laughed. "She's just very active today. I think she liked hearing our conversation about business." Without thinking, she took Ryan's hand and placed it on her belly just as the baby kicked again. His eyes widened in surprise and emotion. "Wow," he whispered, his large, warm hand remaining gently on her belly. "She's really strong." "She's getting stronger every day," Sarah confirmed, trying to ignore how his touch sent waves of warmth throughout her body. They stayed like that for a few minutes, Ryan with his hand on her belly, feeling the baby's movements, Sarah watching the expression of fascination and tenderness on his face. It was a moment of deep intimacy that neither of them had planned, but it felt completely natural. "Sarah," Ryan finally said, his voice low and filled with emotion, "I know our situation is complicated, that you have fears about the future, about the baby's father, but I want you to know that I've never felt as complete as I do with both of you here." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Ryan, you don't need to say anything right now," he continued, finally removing his hand from her belly but maintaining eye contact. "You just need to know that, no matter what happens, you will always have a place here. You will always have a home." The declaration hung in the air between them, laden with promises and possibilities. Sarah knew she was falling for Ryan. She might already be completely in love. But she also knew there were still significant obstacles to overcome. "What if Dr. Richard shows up?" she asked quietly. "What if he tries to cause trouble?" "Then we'll face it together," Ryan replied without hesitation. "You're not alone anymore, Sarah, and your daughter will grow up knowing she is loved and protected." Her daughter, the way he referred to the baby, as if he already considered her part of his family, made Sarah's heart warm in a way she had never experienced before. That night, after Ryan retired to his room, Sarah stayed awake for hours, processing the dramatic changes in her life. 3 months earlier, she had been alone, pregnant and terrified, fleeing from a man who had brutally rejected her and her daughter. Now she was in what was beginning to feel like a true home, with a man who treated her with kindness and respect, who showed genuine affection for her unborn baby. For the first time since discovering her pregnancy, Sarah allowed herself to dream of a happy future. A future where her daughter would grow up surrounded by love, where she herself could build a life based on partnership and mutual respect, where the painful past would be just that, the past. Outside, the rain Ryan had predicted began to fall gently, drumming on the newly repaired roof and watering the garden she had helped revive. The sound was comforting, promising growth and renewal. Sarah placed her hand on her belly, feeling her daughter settle down to sleep, and whispered, "We're home, little un. We're finally home." But even amid the growing happiness, a small but persistent part of her mind whispered warnings about the past she had left behind. Dr. Richard was a powerful and controlling man. Was it possible he would just let her go without consequences? Or would it just be a matter of time before her peaceful refuge was threatened? For now, Sarah chose to focus on the present, on the kind man who had opened his home and heart to her, on the daughter growing healthy in her womb, on the home they were building together. The future would bring its own challenges, but she would face them when the time came. For now, for the first time in a long time, she was truly happy. The month of May arrived with unusual warmth for the autumn in New York. Sarah was 8 months pregnant and felt heavy, uncomfortable, but oddly happy. The cabin had truly become her home, and the routine she shared with Ryan felt as natural as breathing. That Tuesday morning, she was on the back porch hanging clothes on the line when she heard the sound of an unfamiliar car driving up the dirt road. It wasn't the diesel pickup truck of Ryan, nor Dr. Henry's Corolla that visited occasionally. It was a smooth, expensive engine sound, the kind she had learned to recognize during her time with Dr. Richard. Sarah felt her blood run cold. Quickly, she entered the home and headed to the living room window, hiding behind the raw cotton curtain. A silver BMW was parking near the front porch, and a woman stepped out whom Sarah immediately recognized from the photographs in the barn. Emily. She was even more beautiful in person than in the pictures. A natural blonde, slim, elegant even in casual clothes that clearly cost more than a nurse's monthly salary. Her movements had the confidence of someone used to getting what she wanted in life. Sarah instinctively placed her hand on her protruding belly, suddenly feeling awkward and out of place. What was Emily doing here? Ryan had said their relationship was definitely over. Emily knocked on the door with authority, as someone who felt at home. When no one answered, she began to walk around the house, clearly looking for Ryan. Sarah hid in the back room, her heart pounding so hard. She was sure it could be heard through the walls. "Ryan!" Emily's voice echoed across the property. "Rafa, I know you're in there. Your pickup truck is in the barn." Ryan had gone out on foot that morning to check the fence of the north pasture, something he did regularly. He wouldn't be back for at least 2 hours. Sarah heard Emily's footsteps on the porch, then the sound of the front door opening. She was entering the house as if she still owned the place. "Ryan!" Emily called again, now from inside the house. "What a mess! The house is different." Sarah closed her eyes, silently praying for Emily to just leave. But then she heard footsteps approaching the hallway leading to the back rooms. "Hi," said Emily, when she appeared in the doorway of the room, her voice laced with surprise and something that sounded like disdain. "And you are—" Sarah struggled to rise from the bed, trying to maintain her dignity despite feeling completely vulnerable. "Sarah," she replied simply. "And you must be Emily." Emily's blue eyes examined her from head to toe, stopping at the obvious belly. "Interesting," she said, a cold smile touching her lips. "Ryan didn't mention he had company." "Have you spoken to Ryan recently?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Several times," Emily lied smoothly, stepping into the room uninvited. "We have some unresolved matters to discuss." Sarah felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with her pregnancy. Emily's words were specifically chosen to plant doubts, and they were working. "He's not home," Sarah said, "but if you want to wait—" "Oh, I will wait." Emily sat in the only chair in the room, as if it were her own home. "Actually, this gives me a perfect opportunity to talk to you." Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, all her defenses on high alert. "You see," Emily continued, crossing her legs elegantly, "I don't know what story Ryan told you about our relationship, but the truth is we're just taking a break to think things over." "He said you two broke up," Sarah replied, hating how uncertain her voice sounded. Emily laughed, a crystal-clear sound but devoid of humor. "Men always dramatize these things. The truth is, he's going through a tough time. Losing the baby was devastating for both of us. He just needs time to process before we try to build a family again." Every word was a precise stab at Sarah's deepest fears. "Build a family," Emily had said, "in the future, as if it were a pre-established plan." "But tell me about you," Emily continued, her voice taking on a false tone of interest. "Ryan said you're some kind of housekeeper? Helping with the house in exchange for housing?" The humiliation burned on Sarah's cheeks. "I manage the property," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "Of course," Emily nodded condescendingly. "And the father of your baby, is he around to help?" Sarah didn't respond, which was answer enough. "I see," Emily sighed dramatically. "A single mother without a place to live, taking advantage of Ryan's kindness. It's exactly the kind of situation he can't resist fixing." The words hit Sarah like physical slaps. All her deepest insecurities were being exposed and exploited with surgical precision. "You need to understand," Emily continued, standing up and approaching. "Ryan has a savior complex. He always has. He feels responsible for everyone who's struggling, but that doesn't mean his feelings are romantically genuine." Sarah felt tears burning in her eyes. But she refused to cry in front of this woman. "He's been protecting me," she said quietly. "Of course he has," Emily agreed, "because you're pregnant and vulnerable, and he's still processing our loss. You represent a chance for him to feel useful again, to take care of someone, but that's not love, dear. It's therapy." The baby moved vigorously inside Sarah's belly, as if sensing her mother's stress. She placed her hand over her stomach, trying to calm herself. "Ryan and I have history," Emily continued relentlessly. 5 years of relationship, plans for marriage, a lifetime built together. What do you have? A few months of gratitude disguised as romance?" "Please, stop," Sarah whispered. "Look, I'm not being cruel out of malice," Emily said, her tone softening into a convincing imitation of compassion. "I'm just being honest about the reality of the situation. You need to do what's best for your baby, and that means finding real stability, not relying on the temporary charity of a man who's still in love with someone else." Sarah felt the world spin around her. Around her, every word from Emily echoed fears that Marina had tried to bury in the last few months. What if Ryan was really just being kind? What if all the intimate moments they had shared were just him trying to fill the void left by Marina? "I have a proposal for you," Emily said, pulling a business card from her purse. I know a family in New York looking for a housekeeper to live in their home. They pay well, offer a room for you and your baby, and have excellent health insurance. It would be perfect for your situation." Marina looked at the card without picking it up. "Why are you doing this?" "Because," Emily replied, "when Ryan and I come back, and we will come back, it would be better for everyone if there were no complications. You deserve to start your new life as a mother without being stuck in a confusing emotional situation." The sound of Ryan's pickup truck approaching interrupted the conversation. Emily smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Think about what I said." She left the card on the dresser. "And remember, a man who truly loves you wouldn't make you feel like an intruder in his life." With those words, Emily left the room, leaving Marina alone with her devastating doubts and the card that represented an escape to a life she didn't want, but that might be the only honest option available. Outside, she could hear the voices of Ryan and Emily, but she couldn't distinguish the words. His tone sounded surprised, hers cheerful and familiar. Marina closed her eyes and wondered if she had imagined all the happiness of the last few months. If she had been foolish enough to believe that a man like Ryan could truly fall in love with a pregnant nurse with no prospects. For the first time since arriving at the cabin, Marina seriously considered the possibility of leaving. Maybe Emily was right. Maybe what she had interpreted as love was just disguised pity. And maybe it was time to stop living in a fairy tale and face the harsh reality of her situation. Marina stayed in the room for over an hour after Emily left, the business card burning like a branding iron on the dresser. The voices of Ryan and Emily had moved away from the house, probably walking through the grounds they had once planned to call home. With each passing minute, Emily's poisonous words echoed, louder in Marina's mind. "A savior complex," she murmured to the emptiness, running her hand over her belly. "Maybe she's right, little one. Maybe Mommy has confused kindness with love." When she finally heard the front door open and Ryan's familiar footsteps echoing through the house, Marina felt a mix of relief and terror. Part of her wanted to run into his arms and forget everything Emily had said. Another part wanted to confront him with each of the devastating accusations. "Marina?" His voice sounded in the hallway, laden with a concern she now questioned if it was genuine. "Where?" "Are you?" "Here," she replied, stepping out of the room with difficulty. Ryan appeared in the hallway, his hair tousled by the wind and a confused expression on his face. "Emily said she talked to you. I hope she wasn't rude." Marina studied his face, looking for signs of deceit or dissimulation. "What did you two talk about?" "Things from the past," Ryan replied vaguely, stepping closer. "Financial matters that needed to be resolved. Nothing important." The evasiveness confirmed Marina's worst fears. If it was really nothing important, why wouldn't he be specific? "She said you two are just taking a break," Marina said, watching his reaction closely. Ryan's face instantly closed off. "She said that?" "Among other things." Marina crossed her arms over her protruding belly. "Ryan, I need to know the truth. About you two. About what I mean to you. About everything." Ryan sighed deeply, running his hand through his hair, in a gesture Marina had learned to recognize as a sign of nervousness. "Marina, let's talk in the living room. You shouldn't be standing for so long." "No," she said firmly. "We're going to talk right here. And I want the whole truth, Ryan. Don't. I deserve that after everything." The determination in her voice seemed to surprise him. He looked at her for a long moment, as if seeing a facet of her personality he didn't know. "All right," he finally said. "The truth is that Emily wants us to go back. She has a job proposal for me in New York, a partnership in an agribusiness company that would be very lucrative." Marina's heart sank. "And you? Do you want to go back to her?" Ryan hesitated, and that hesitation felt like a stab. "It's complicated, Marina. Emily and I have a long history. We have shared dreams that were interrupted by tragedy. That's not an answer, Marina interrupted him, her voice growing firmer. The question is simple. Do you still love her? Ryan visibly struggled with the words. Part of me will always love who she was to me, but that doesn't mean... Ryan. Marina's voice cut through his words like a blade. Yes or no? Are you still in love with Emily? The silence that followed was deafening. Marina saw the answer in his eyes before he could formulate the words. I don't know, he finally admitted, the words coming out like a confession dragged from him. I thought I was moving on. I thought I had found something new with you, but when I saw her today, all those emotions came back. The pain, the loss, but also the memories of who we were together. Marina felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Ryan's brutal honesty was both devastating and strangely respectful. He was giving her the dignity of the truth, even if it hurt. And me? She asked softly. What do I represent to you? Ryan stepped closer, trying to touch her face, but she pulled away. You represent... He struggled with the words. You represent peace, healing, the possibility of being who I want to be instead of who I'm haunted by being. But I don't know if that's enough to build a true future. So Emily was right, Sarah said, feeling tears streaming down her cheeks. I'm just therapy for you, a way to feel useful while you process your real pain. It's not that simple. It is exactly that, Sarah cut him off. You saved me because you couldn't save your own baby. You cared for me because you couldn't care. For Emily when she needed you, I'm just a substitute for the people you really loved. Sarah, that's not fair. Fair? Her voice rose an octave. You want to talk about fairness? Is it fair to let me fall in love with you when your heart still belongs to someone else? Is it fair to let me believe that I could have a future here when you're still deciding if you want to go back to your ex-fiancé? Ryan seemed to shrink under the weight of her words. You're right, he said quietly. I was selfish. I wanted so much, to feel whole again, that I didn't think about how this could affect you. The admission, though honest, was like salt in an open wound. Sarah leaned against the wall, feeling the emotional and physical weight of the situation. I need to get out of here, she said, more to herself than to him. What? No, Sarah, you don't have to. We can work this out. Work it out how? She asked, looking directly into his eyes. Can you look me in the eyes right now and tell me for sure that you love me, that you want to build a life with me and my daughter, that you're not considering Emily's proposal? Ryan's silence was answer enough. Sarah nodded, wiping the tears from her face. Emily gave me the card of a family in New York that is looking for a housekeeper. Private room, decent salary, health plan. Maybe that's exactly what I need. You can't be seriously considering this, Ryan said, alarmed. You're 8 months pregnant. You can't just... Can't what? Manage on my own? Sarah laughed bitterly. I managed on my own just fine before I came here, Ryan. Maybe it was a mistake to forget that. Sarah, please, let's talk this through. You're hurt. You're making impulsive decisions. I'm making decisions based on reality, she corrected him. The reality is that you're still in love with Emily. The reality is that I deluded myself into thinking kindness was love. The reality is that my daughter deserves to grow up in a home that isn't a constant reminder of someone's inability to move on from the past. The words hit Ryan like physical slaps. He tried to respond, but Sarah continued. You know what's the saddest part? It's that I really believed I had found my place in the world. For the first time in my life, I thought someone saw me as more than a convenience or an obligation. But Emily was right. I'm just another broken person that you're trying to fix. That's not true, Ryan said desperately. The feelings I've developed for you are real, Sarah. The way I feel when I'm with you is real. "But it's not enough," she replied sadly, "and it never will be, because I will always be the second choice. I will always be wondering if you would prefer to be with her." Sarah headed to the bedroom, Ryan following her. "What are you doing?" he asked when he saw her pulling the suitcase from under the bed. "Doing what I should have done from the start," she replied, beginning to pack her few clothes. "Taking care of myself and my daughter without relying on anyone's charity." "Sarah, stop! You can't travel pregnant. It's not safe. I'm staying at an inn in town tonight, and tomorrow I'm taking the bus to New York," she said, avoiding looking at him. "Dr. Henry can give me the name of an obstetrician in the city." Ryan stood in the doorway of the bedroom, watching her pack with a growing expression of despair. When she finished and turned to leave, he blocked her path. "I'm not going to let you leave like this," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "Not pregnant, not alone." "You don't have a choice," Sarah replied, her voice gaining a strength she didn't know she possessed. "I'm not your responsibility, Ryan. I never was, and it's time for both of us to admit that." She stepped away from him and walked toward the front door, carrying her suitcase and all the dignity she could muster. "Tai-Tai, the porch." She paused without turning around. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking slightly, "for giving me a home when I needed it, for taking care of me when I was lost. But now I need to learn to be strong on my own." With those words, Sarah left the cabin that had become her home, carrying a broken heart but a fierce determination to build a future where her daughter would never feel like a burden or an obligation in anyone's life. Behind her, Ryan remained on the porch, watching the woman who had brought life back into his home walk away down the dusty road, taking with her all the light that had illuminated his dark days. The Clearwaters Inn, on the main street of Clearwaters, had simple but clean rooms, with floral wallpaper and dark wood furniture reminiscent of someone's grandmother's house. Sarah sat on the edge of the single bed, looking out the window that overlooked the town square, where some children were playing on the swings, even as the sun was setting. 3 days had passed since she left the cabin, and the pain in her chest had not lessened at all. Each movement of the baby in her belly seemed to ask why they had left the only place that had felt like home. Sarah placed. With her hand on her belly, she whispered apologies she couldn't even explain to herself. "We're going to be okay, little one," she murmured, though she wasn't sure she believed her own words. "Mommy will find a way." On the first night, she had called the number on the card that Emily had given her. The Johnson family lived in a mansion on the Upper East Side and really needed a housekeeper who could live in. Mrs. Beatrice Johnson, a 60-year-old woman with an authoritative voice, had asked several questions about experience and references, but when she learned that Sarah was 8 months pregnant, the tone of the conversation changed drastically. "Dear, it would be impossible in this situation," she said with false compassion. "A pregnant housekeeper can't perform all the necessary duties, and after the baby is born, well, a small child in the house always complicates things." Sarah hung up the phone, feeling humiliated and even more lost. Emily had known from the beginning that the position wouldn't be viable. The card was just a cruel way to get her out of the way. On the second day, she tried other numbers from domestic employment agencies in New York. The response was always the same. No one wanted to hire a pregnant housekeeper about to give birth. Some didn't even bother to be polite in their refusals. It was then that Dr. Henry showed up at the inn. "Sarah," he said when she opened the door to her small room, "what's this story about you being here instead of at the cabin?" The family doctor entered the small room as if he were a guest, his paternal gaze scanning the modest surroundings before landing on her with concern. "It didn't work out," Sarah replied simply, trying to maintain her dignity. "Sometimes situations change." "Nonsense," Dr. Henry said bluntly, sitting in the only chair in the room. "Ryan is a wreck since you left. He doesn't eat, doesn't sleep, wanders around the cabin like a lost soul. And you're here, 8 months pregnant, trying to figure life out on your own. Dr. Henry, with all due respect, that's not... It is my business. He gently interrupted her. I brought that boy into this world. I watched him grow. I suffered with him when he lost the baby and his fiancée. And I've seen him happier in the last few months than he has been in years. Sarah felt tears burning in her eyes. But he still loves her. His ex-fiancée showed up and... Ah, Emily... Dr. Henry made a displeased expression. I always knew that girl wasn't right for Ryan. Very selfish, too self-centered. After she lost the baby, she could only think of her own pain, never his. But he admitted he still has feelings for her, Sarah insisted. Of course he does. The doctor agreed, surprising her. 5 years of a relationship don't just disappear overnight. But Sarah, dear, there's a difference between having feelings for the past and wanting to live in it. Dr. Henry leaned forward, his experienced hands gesturing as he spoke. Do you want to know what I saw when I visited you at the cabin? I saw a man who had found a reason to smile again. I saw someone who cared for you with a tenderness he never showed to anyone, not even to Emily. I saw a future being built, not a past being remembered. But if he truly loved me, he wouldn't have doubts, Sarah protested. He wouldn't consider going back to her. My daughter, Dr. Henry chuckled softly. Do you think true love means never having doubts? Does it mean never feeling confused when the past knocks on the door? Sarah fell silent, processing the doctor's words. Ryan is a good man, but he's human, he continued. When Emily showed up, she brought with her all the memories of who he used to be, all the dreams that were interrupted. It's natural for that to confuse him. So you think I should go back? Sarah asked hesitantly. I think, Dr. Henry said as he stood up, that 2 wounded people have a unique opportunity to heal together if they are brave enough to fight for it. After the doctor left, Sarah spent the entire night awake, her hands resting on her belly as she felt the restless movements of her daughter. It was as if the baby could sense her mother's emotional tension. On the 3rd day, Sarah made a decision that surprised her. Instead of looking for a job in New York, she took a bus to Springfield and visited the public library. She spent hours researching labor rights, legislation for single mothers, and government support programs. She discovered that she had more options than she had imagined. She could apply for a housing program for single mothers, receive assistance to raise her daughter while studying for civil service exams in the healthcare field. It wouldn't be easy, but she would be independent. It would be hers. This revelation brought unexpected clarity. For the first time since leaving the cabin, Sarah felt she had real choices, not just desperate escapes. That night, back at the inn, she was organizing the informational brochures she had collected when she heard a soft knock on the door. Her heart raced. Could it be Ryan? Had he come after her? When she opened the door, she found Emily standing in the hallway. Hi, the woman said, her voice surprisingly hesitant. Can we talk? Sarah felt every muscle in her body tense. There's nothing to talk about. Please, Emily insisted. Just 5 minutes. I need to tell you some things. Against her better judgment, Sarah allowed her to enter. Emily looked different, less composed, less self-assured. Her stylish clothes seemed wrinkled, and there were dark circles under her blue eyes. Ryan doesn't know I'm here, Emily began, sitting in the chair that Dr. Henry had occupied earlier. In fact, he was furious when he found out I had spoken to you. Sarah remained standing, crossing her arms defensively. Why are you here, Emily? To apologize, Emily said, her words sounding genuinely remorseful, and to tell you the truth that I omitted. What truth? Emily took a deep breath before. Ryan isn't considering coming back to me. He never has. When I showed up at the cabin, I was desperate because my life in New York was falling apart. Lost my job, I have debts I can't pay, and I thought I could convince him to give me a second chance. Sarah felt a mix of relief and anger. "So you lied." "I lied about a lot of things," Emily admitted. "I said we had talked several times, that we were just taking a break." All lies. The truth is, we haven't spoken in over 6 months, since he told me definitively that our relationship was over. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because," Emily sighed heavily, "because when I left the cabin that day, Ryan made it very clear that he was in love with you. He said you brought life back to him in a way I never could." Sarah's heart began to race. "He said that?" "He did. And he also spoke some truths about our relationship that I didn't want to hear." Emily paused, clearly struggling with the next words. "He said I had always been selfish, that even when I lost the baby, I could only see my own pain, that you taught him what it meant to love someone more than yourself." Tears began to stream down Sarah's face. "Then, why did he hesitate when I asked if he still loved you?" "Because you caught him off guard," Emily explained. "Because seeing an ex always brings emotional confusion, even when you're sure you've moved on. But Sarah, you should have seen his face when he realized you had left. It was pure despair." Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, processing these revelations. "I don't know if I can believe you. You lied before." "I know," Emily nodded, "but now I have nothing to gain by being dishonest. Ryan made it clear that there is no future for us. And seeing how he spoke about you, well, I realized he never spoke about me that way, not even when we were together." The two women sat in silence for a few minutes, each lost in her own thoughts. "What are you going to do now?" Sarah finally asked. "Go back to New York, try to rebuild my life on my own," Emily replied. "And you? Are you going back to him?" Sarah looked out the window, where the first stars were beginning to appear in the night sky. "I don't know. Maybe it's too late. Maybe I've messed everything up with my insecurity. Sarah," Emily stood up to leave, "a man who loves you doesn't give up easily. And from the signs I've seen, Ryan Johnson is far from giving up on you." After Emily left, Sarah spent another sleepless night. But this time, it wasn't from pain or confusion, it was from hope, a fragile but real hope that maybe it wasn't too late to fight for the love she had found and lost. For the first time in days, when she placed her hand on her belly and felt the movements of her daughter, she whispered words of optimism. "Maybe we can still have our home, little one. Maybe Mommy just needs to be brave enough to fight for it." Sarah woke the next morning with a determination she hadn't felt in days. The sun was streaming through the inn's window, illuminating the brochures about government support programs she had spread out on the small table. For the first time since leaving the cabin, she had clarity about what she needed to do, but first she needed courage. She put on her best outfit, a navy blue dress that accentuated her belly without making her look awkward, and styled her hair in a low bun that gave her a more mature look. If she was going to confront Ryan, she wanted to look presentable. She wanted him to see the strong woman she was becoming, not the desperate runaway who had left 3 days earlier. The walk back to the cabin was longer than she remembered. The May sun was strong for the season, and Sarah had to stop several times to rest. With each step, she mentally rehearsed what she would say, how she would explain her sudden departure, how she would admit that maybe she had been too hasty in her conclusions. When she finally spotted the property, her heart raced. Ryan's pickup truck was parked haphazardly near the barn, the doors open as if he had left in a hurry. The garden she had tended to so lovingly showed signs of neglect. Some plants wilted from lack of water, weeds starting to invade the organized beds. Sarah felt a pang of guilt. Just 3 days, and she could already see the reflection of her absence on the property. She found Ryan in the orchard, sitting under an apple tree laden with fruit, his head in his hands. He didn't hear her approach. He was so lost in his own thoughts that he only realized she was there when she spoke. "The apples are ready for harvest," she said softly. Ryan lifted his head so quickly that he almost lost his balance. His eyes were red from exhaustion, his face covered with a 3-day beard that gave him a wild look. When he saw her, his expression went through a series of emotions: surprise, relief, hope, fear. "Sarah," he said, his voice hoarse as if he hadn't used it much in the last few days. You came back." "I came back," she confirmed, sitting down awkwardly on the grass beside him, keeping a respectful distance. "We need to talk." Ryan watched her as if she were a mirage that could disappear if he blinked. "How are you? Is the baby okay? Where have you been?" The genuine concern in his voice made Sarah's heart tighten. "We're fine. I stayed at the inn in town. Dr. Henry stopped by to check on me." "I know," Ryan admitted. "I asked him to do that. I wanted to come personally, but I thought you didn't want to see me." Sarah studied his face, seeing the exhaustion and pain etched in every line of expression. "Emily came to see me yesterday." Ryan's body tensed immediately. "What did she say to you?" "The truth," Sarah replied simply. "Finally." Ryan ran his hand through his messy hair, a gesture that Sarah had learned to recognize as nervousness. "Sarah, about what happened before you left. I couldn't stop thinking about what you said, about what I said, and you were right about a lot of things." "Was I?" "You were right when you said that I still had feelings for Emily," he continued, looking directly into her eyes. "But you were wrong about what those feelings meant." Sarah waited in silence, allowing him to find his own words. "When Emily showed up here," Ryan continued slowly, "it was like a ghost from my past had materialized. For a few minutes, for a few hours, I remembered who I used to be with her. But you know what I realized after you left?" "What?" "That who I used to be with her isn't who I want to be for the rest of my life." Ryan turned to face her completely. "With Emily, I always felt like I was trying to be someone I wasn't, trying to live a life that looked right on paper but never quite fit." Sarah felt her breath quicken. "And with me?" "With you." His voice softened. "I feel like myself. I don't have to pretend to be more sophisticated or more successful than I am. I don't have to hide that I prefer the silence of the countryside to the noise of the city, that I enjoy working the land with my own hands." "Ryan, let me finish," he pleaded. "I need to say this. When you asked if I still loved Emily, I hesitated because I was confused. But the confusion wasn't about my feelings for her. It was about how to explain that it's possible to love someone you were without wanting to become that person again." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because I didn't understand it myself," Ryan admitted. "It took me 3 days without you to realize that the confusion I felt when Emily showed up wasn't longing or love. It was nostalgia, and there's a huge difference between feeling nostalgic for the past and wanting to live in it." The baby stirred vigorously in Sarah's belly, as if reacting to the emotion in her voice. She placed her hand on her belly, and Ryan followed the movement with his eyes. "How is she?" he asked softly. "Restless," Sarah smiled through her tears. "I think she misses being here too." "And you?" Ryan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you miss being here?" Sarah looked around, at the home that had become her first true home, at the garden she had helped create, at the man who had shown her what it meant to be truly cared for. "I missed home," she finally said, "and I discovered that home isn't a place. It's where you feel complete." Ryan hesitantly reached out his hand, and Sarah took it without hesitation. Their fingers intertwined with the familiarity of people who knew each other deeply. "Sarah," he said, "I made a terrible mistake. I let Emily's appearance confuse me. I let you doubt what I felt for you. But I want you to know, I love you. I love your strength, your kindness, the way you cared for this property as if it were your own. I love how you think of everyone before you think of yourself, and I love how your presence has turned this house into a home." "I love you too," Sarah whispered. "But I'm scared, Ryan. Scared of not being enough. Scared that one day you'll tire of caring for a single mommy and her daughter." "Sarah, look at me," Ryan said, letting go of her hand to gently hold her face. "You are not a charity project. You are not someone I'm trying to save. You are the woman I fell in love with, the person who made me believe again that I could have a family." "A family," Sarah repeated the words, testing how they sounded. "If you want," Ryan said, his voice heavy with hope and nervousness. "I know your daughter isn't biologically mine, but I love her as if she were. From the first day I felt her move in your belly, I knew I wanted to be the father she deserves." Sarah began to cry, not tears of sadness, but of deep relief and overwhelming happiness. "Are you sure?" she asked through her tears. "Won't you regret it? Won't you feel like you're raising another man's daughter?" "Sarah," Ryan said, wiping her tears with his thumbs, "I will raise our daughter, because from the moment you let me be part of your lives, she will be our daughter. What matters isn't who brought her into the world, but who chooses to love her every day." The kiss that followed was gentle, full of promises and second chances. Sarah felt as if all the broken pieces of her life were finally falling into place. When they parted, Ryan rested his forehead against hers. "Welcome back home," he whispered. Sarah laughed, a pure sound of happiness. "I'm ready to stay, forever, if you'll let me." "That's all I want," Ryan replied. "You, our daughter, and all the sunrises to come." Sitting under the apple tree, with the sun filtering through the leaves and creating patterns of light and shadow around them, Sarah finally allowed herself to believe that she had found not just a home, but a true family. And for the first time since discovering her pregnancy, she wasn't afraid of the future. She was looking forward to it. 6 weeks later, on a sunny June morning, Sarah woke up with the first contractions. The baby had decided it was time to meet the world, and interestingly, Sarah felt no fear. Beside her in bed, Ryan woke up at the same moment as if he had sensed it, an internal radar tuned to her needs. "Is it time?" he asked, completely alert despite just waking up. "I think so," Sarah smiled, placing her hand on her belly. She chose a beautiful day to be born. Ryan had meticulously prepared everything in the weeks leading up to this moment. The hospital bag had been ready for a month, the car was fueled, and Dr. Henry's number was on speed dial. But in the actual moment, his hands trembled slightly as he helped her get dressed. "Are you nervous?" Sarah asked, watching him check for the third time if he had the car keys. "Terrified," Ryan admitted with a smile. "And you?" "Strangely calm," she replied, pausing to breathe through a stronger contraction. "I feel like she's eager to meet her dad." The word dad still made Ryan's heart race with emotion. In the past few weeks, he had read every parenting book he could find at the bookstore in Springfield, set up the crib in the room next to his, which was now officially theirs, and even talked to the baby every night, telling her about the orchard trees, the animals on the property, and how nice it would be to teach her to ride a horse when she grew up. The drive to the hospital in clear waters was smooth. Ryan drove with the extreme care of someone carrying the world's most precious treasure, stopping gently at every speed bump and avoiding every pothole. Sarah held his free hand, squeezing it during the contractions that came at increasingly shorter intervals. Dr. Henry greeted them in the maternity ward with his usual fatherly smile, but Sarah could see the emotion in his eyes. He had become more than a doctor to them. He was like a grandfather waiting for his first grandchild. "Well, well," he said after examining Sarah. "It seems our little one is in a hurry. Just a few more hours, and we'll have a new citizen of Clear Waters." The labor was long but uncomplicated. Ryan stayed by Sarah's side the entire time, wiping her face with a damp cloth, whispering words of encouragement, holding her hand like an anchor during the waves of pain. "You're being amazing," he murmured during the toughest moments. "Our daughter will be born knowing she has the strongest mom in the world." Sarah clung to those words, that certainty that she wasn't alone, that there was someone there who genuinely wanted to be present for every second of this experience. At 3:47 p.m., with a strong cry that echoed through the delivery room, Emma Johnson entered the world. Dr. Henry immediately placed her on Sarah's chest, and the silence that followed was magical. Even the assistants paused to witness the moment when 2 lives became 3. "Hello, little one," Sarah whispered, tears streaming freely down her face. "I can finally meet you." Emma had dark hair like Sarah's, but when she opened her eyes a few minutes later, they were light like Ryan's. It was as if the universe had conspired to create a perfect family from the start. Ryan held both of them as if they were made of crystal, his face wet with tears he didn't even try to hide. "She's perfect," he said, gently touching the tiny hand of the baby. "Emma, welcome to the family." The name had been chosen 3 weeks earlier, during a walk through the orchard. It meant bright light, and it seemed perfect for the girl who had illuminated their lives even before she was born. In the following days, the cabin transformed into a haven of domestic happiness. Ryan had taken 2 weeks off from his commitments to fully dedicate himself to his new family. He woke up even before Sarah to prepare coffee and check if she needed anything during Emma's nighttime feedings. "You don't have to do all this," Sarah said one morning, finding him in the kitchen preparing smoothies and fruits for her. "I can manage." "I know you can," Ryan replied, leaning in to kiss her on the forehead. "But you don't have to. That's the point of having a family, to take care of each other." Sarah watched with growing fascination as Ryan interacted with Emma. He held the baby with a naturalness that surprised her, talking to her during diaper changes as if she were an adult who could respond. And he had developed a particular rocking technique that seemed to calm Emma instantly. "Where did you learn to do that?" she asked one afternoon, watching. Ryan cradled Emma while humming an old country song. "My grandma used to say that babies can feel when they are truly loved," he replied, looking into their daughter's eyes. "Emma knows she's wanted here. That's why she's so calm." It was true. Emma was a surprisingly calm baby, as if she had been born knowing she was safe and loved. She slept well, nursed without difficulty, and seemed genuinely interested in the world around her. One afternoon, while Sarah rested and Ryan cared for Emma on the porch, Dr. Henry stopped by for an informal visit. He found Ryan sitting in the rocking chair that had belonged to his grandfather, Emma sleeping peacefully in his arms. "How are you doing, Dad?" the doctor asked with a smile. "Better than I imagined," Ryan replied, adjusting the blanket covering Emma. "It's amazing how something so small can completely change your perspective on everything." Dr. Henry sat in a nearby chair, watching the scene with satisfaction. "You know, Ryan, in all my years of medicine, I've seen many types of families. Biological families that can't love each other, adoptive families that are closer than many traditional ones. What matters isn't how the family is formed, it's the love that grows within it." "I know," Ryan said, looking out the window where he could see Sarah tending to the garden that had begun to flourish under her care. "I never thought I could love someone more than I loved Emily, but what I feel for Sarah, Emma, is different. It's deeper, more complete." 2 weeks after Emma's birth, Sarah was in the kitchen preparing dinner when she heard the sound of an unfamiliar car on the road. Her heart raced for a moment. Since Emma was born, she had developed a fierce, protective instinct that kept her alert for potential threats. She looked out the window and saw a black Audi parking near the porch. Her blood ran cold when she recognized the man who got out of the vehicle. Dr. Richard Miller had found his way to them. Ryan was in the barn with Emma, showing her the kittens that had been born the week before. Sarah knew she had only a few minutes before Richard reached the front door. With quick movements, she placed Emma in the portable crib in the living room and went to meet Richard on the porch, intercepting him before he could enter the house. "Richard," she said, her voice firmer than it had ever been in his presence. "What are you doing here?" Dr. Richard Miller looked exactly as she remembered, tall, well-dressed, with that air of superiority that always made her feel small. But this time, Sarah realized she didn't feel intimidated. She was protecting her home, her family. "Sarah," he said, his condescending tone as always, "did you really think you could disappear and I wouldn't find out where you were?" "I didn't disappear," she replied calmly. "I built a new life." Richard looked around the property with barely concealed disdain. "What life? Playing farmer in the middle of nowhere?" "A life where I am respected and loved," Sarah retorted, surprising herself with the strength in her own voice. "And my daughter?" Richard asked, and Sarah felt a wave of pure anger. "Your daughter?" she repeated, incredulous. "When I told you about the pregnancy, you offered me money to have an abortion. When I refused, you said it didn't fit into your plans. And now she's your daughter." "I've had time to rethink," Richard said, trying to adopt a softer tone. "And I've concluded that I have responsibilities towards the child." "What responsibilities?" Sarah asked, crossing her arms. "Do you want to visit her on weekends, pay child support, be an active father in her life?" "I want custody," Richard said simply, as if making a reasonable request. Sarah felt the world spin around her. "What?" "Sarah, be realistic," he continued. "You're living on a rural property that isn't even yours, with a man you've known for just a few months. I can offer my daughter a quality education, financial stability, a guaranteed future." "She doesn't need money," Sarah said, her voice trembling with anger. "She needs love, and that's something you've never been able to offer." It was then that she heard Ryan's footsteps approaching the house. He appeared on the porch carrying Emma, who was awake and watching everything with her bright, curious eyes. "Is there a problem here?" Ryan asked, his voice controlled, but laden with implicit threat. Richard looked at him with the same disdain he had directed at the property. "And you must be the new boyfriend. How romantic, playing family." "I am Emma's father," Ryan replied simply, moving closer to Sarah. The declaration made Richard laugh. "Father? How long have you known this woman? A few months, and now you think you're the father of my biological daughter?" "Fatherhood," Ryan said, his voice taking on a dangerous edge, "is not about who contributed the genetic material. It's about who is present every day, who wakes up in the middle of the night when she cries, who plans a future with her well-being in mind." Sarah watched the two men confront each other and felt an absolute clarity about the difference between them. Richard represented her past, a time when she allowed herself to be belittled, controlled, disrespected. Ryan represented her future, partnership, genuine love, a family built on solid foundations. "Emma has a family," she finally said, standing beside Ryan. "A family that loves her unconditionally and wants her for who she is, not for what she can represent in terms of image or status." "Do you really think you can prevent me from seeing my daughter?" Richard asked, his mask of civility beginning to slip. "I think," Ryan said, "that any man who offers money to a woman to abort a baby loses the moral right to claim fatherhood later." Richard's face turned red with anger. "You don't know anything about our situation." "I know enough," Ryan replied, adjusting Emma in his arms protectively. And I know that if you really cared about this child's well-being, you would have tried to support Sarah during the pregnancy, not expelled her from your life when she needed you the most. Sarah looked at Emma, who was watching everything with that serious expression that babies sometimes have, as if they understand more than they let on. Richard, she finally said, you can try legal action if you want. You can try to prove you have legal rights over Emma, but I want you to know you will find a fight, because now I have resources, I have support, and I have a family that is willing to fight for us. You will regret this, Richard threatened, but Sarah could see he was already backing down. The only thing I regret, she replied, is having wasted a year of my life with a man who never saw me as anything more than a convenience. Richard looked at the three of them, Sarah, Ryan, and Emma, and must have seen something that made him realize he had lost any power he might have had over them. Without another word, he returned to his car and drove off, kicking up a cloud of dust on the dirt road. Sarah collapsed into a chair on the porch, her legs weak from adrenaline. Ryan sat down beside her, still holding Emma. "Do you think he will try something legal?" she asked. "Maybe," Ryan replied honestly. "Adaptações, Helena, Emma, São Paulo, New York. But if you try, we will be ready. Dr. Henry knows good lawyers in the area, and we have documentation of everything. How you got here, how we built our life together, how Emma is being cared for." Sarah looked at Emma, who had fallen asleep in Ryan's arms, seemingly unbothered by the confrontation. Then she looked at Ryan, this man who had chosen to face his past alongside her without hesitation. "Thank you," she said simply. "Why?" "For defending me, for defending us, for—" she struggled to find the right words, "for making me feel worth protecting." Ryan shifted Emma to one arm and used his free hand to touch Sarah's face. "You have always been worth it. You just needed someone who knew how to recognize your value." In that moment, sitting on the porch of the home they had transformed into a haven, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that she had found where she belonged. Not just a place, but a person who saw her for who she truly was, who was willing to fight alongside her, who had chosen to love not just her, but also her daughter. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. In her arms, Emma slept peacefully, oblivious to the dramas of the adult world. And between Sarah and Ryan, a silent certainty grew that they had built something strong enough to withstand any storm the future might bring. 6 months later, on a December afternoon, Sarah was in the garden picking tomatoes from the vegetable patch when she heard Emma take her first steps. Ryan was on the lawn, kneeling with open arms, calling, "Come on, Emma, come to Daddy." And Emma, at 8 months old, with fierce determination in her bright eyes, let go of the fence she was holding onto and walked 4 wobbly but determined steps into Ryan's arms. Sarah dropped the tomatoes and ran to join the celebration, the three of them embracing on the lawn as Emma laughed with the pure joy of a child who knows, instinctively, that she is deeply loved. That night, after putting Emma to bed, Sarah and Ryan sat on the porch watching the stars. It was a warm summer night, with the scent of jasmine in the air and the soft sound of crickets creating a rural symphony. "Did you know," Sarah said, resting her head on Ryan's shoulder, "that exactly a year ago I was running away here, pregnant and terrified, thinking my life was over? And now," Ryan asked, kissing the top of her head. "Now I know it was just beginning," Sarah replied, intertwining her fingers with his. "Real life, the true one, began the day I arrived here, and you decided I was worth protecting." "No," Ryan gently corrected her. "It began the day you decided you were worth fighting for yourself and for Emma. I was just lucky to be here when you made that decision." Sarah smiled, feeling a deep peace fill her chest. In the distance, she could hear the soft sound of Emma's breathing through the monitor. They kept on, Her daughter slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that she would wake up in a home full of love, with two parents who chose her and would continue to choose her every day of her life. And under the starry sky of a summer night in New York, Sarah finally allowed herself to fully believe in the future they had built. A future where a shy nurse had become a strong woman, where a wounded man had learned to love again, and where a girl would grow up knowing she was loved not by chance, but by deliberate and joyful choice. The seasons had completed their cycle, from fear to love, from loneliness to family, from despair to hope. And as the gentle wind swayed the trees in the orchard that Emma would soon learn to climb, Sarah knew she was finally, completely home.